Focus on Headline. And let's take a look at what major issues are making the headlines today on Focus on Headline. For this, joining us in the studio today, we have our reporters in Kwon-soa and Chang-ana. Guys, welcome back.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening to you guys. We're going to start things off with our top story this evening. The first day visit from Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. Well, the meeting between the leaders of South Korea and Japan did take place on this Friday. We had President Yoon and Prime Minister Kishida discussing bilateral ties and common interests, which was already, by the way, their 12th meeting under the Yoon administration. Certainly very different from the previous liberal Moon administration, where there was little to no meetings between the leaders there. But so you're going to start us off. Tell us about the latest meeting between the two leaders.
Right. So it looks like the meeting has just ended a little while ago, and the two have held discussions for around an hour and 40 minutes. Probably they have maybe kicked off their dinner by now. So let me tell you what is coming in right now. First off, a briefing looks like it is being held right now at the presidential office. So first off, Prime Minister Kishida from Japan is here in Seoul for 2 days. And it is, as you said, SJ, the 12th meeting between President Yoon and Prime Minister Fumio Kishida during the past around 2 years. So this is after the two sides have decided to improve relations, and since then have kicked off their so-called shuttle diplomacy, which means they are, frequently seeing each other, visiting each other's countries as well. So the two sides today have reviewed their efforts in improving bilateral ties in the past years, and also spoke about additional ways of cooperation. Although we know that Kishida has recently announced that he will not run for the next election, so he won't be the next prime minister of Japan, and he won't run for the Liberal Democratic Party for the next 3 years. So that means this is probably going to be the last summit between President Yoon and Prime Minister Kishida as the leaders of the respective countries. What we just learned is that the two sides decided to signed an MOU on protecting each other's nationals in third country emergencies. So that was something that we have been expecting slightly, and it looks like they have decided to make this an actual agreement. And also they have reviewed the progresses in, improving the ties during the discussions they had over the past 2 years, and also the discussions they had with their other U.S. counterpart, Joe Biden, because the three sides also in the past 2 years enhanced trilateral cooperation, especially when it comes to dealing with threats from North Korea. So yes, if I take a look at some of the statements that we see here, President Yoon Yeol, it looks like, has told his Japanese counterpart that it was a big achievement during his term. Until now, it was one of his biggest achievements, the agreement with Fumio Kishida, that they are going to, normalize ties between the two countries, or rather improve them. And also Prime Minister Kishida has made some remarks regarding the historic issues that still remain between Seoul and Tokyo, that he understands the grievances that Koreans are feeling regarding the past. But these are information that are just trickling in. So if we have more, comprehensive information, probably we're going to talk about that later in maybe next week as well.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because, again, Kishida, he does not have many weeks left until he steps down from his position. He was not, enjoying a very nice approval rating amongst the public, but even amongst his own party members, because of the scandal that was going on, the economic situation right now in Japan. But despite this, right, he wanted to make sure, as long as he is still the prime minister, to appreciate the sort of improved relations under the Yoon Kishida, the administration that we saw over the past few years now. And who knows, even if there is and there will be a new prime minister in Japan, the consensus is that as long as President Yoon is still in office, that South Korea and Japan will still enjoy the improved relations. So I guess it's kind of like Kishida's way of saying, let's say, I'm going to be out of office and a new leader is going to be put in place, but still, let's, continue moving forward here. So I think there is some significance in that. Who knows? President Yoon Suk-yeol might be really the last leader that Kishida might be meeting for a summit. Let's move on here. And of course, we'll get more information on this because there is still tomorrow that I believe Kishida is going to be staying in Seoul. Get some more updates on this and hopefully report on this on Monday. The Joint Chiefs of Staff announcing that North Korea launched around 260 balloons carrying trash once again. This between the nights of Thursday and early hours of Friday. 2 straight days they've been doing their trash-carrying balloon campaigns once again. So far, approximately 140 pieces of debris have been found in the Seoul and Gyeonggi regions. Hannah, let's get more on this.
Sure. Now, the content of the balloons were trash, including paper and plastic bottles, with no hazardous materials posing a safety threat. Now, each bag attached to the balloons contained multiple bundles, and when the balloons burst in the air, the bags split into smaller ones. As a result, the number of balloons does not exactly match the number of pieces of debris. The JCS stated that for operational security reasons, we cannot disclose the exact location where the balloons landed. Since last May, North Korea has sent trash-filled balloons toward the south 14 times in protest of leaflets launched by South Korean civilian groups.
Again, there's little of the ballistic missile firing or cruise missile firings from the north. Instead, their provocation has been largely centered on these trash-carrying balloons. And as we mentioned, what some of the North Korean experts are saying is because the reason why we're seeing less and less ballistic missile tests is because, well, they could certainly use that to sell it to North Korea. But apparently, Kim Jong-un had gotten some purebred horses in exchange for some of the weaponry that he sent over to Russia. Moving on to the medical standoff here in the nation. Unfortunately, it has been going on for way too long here. To alleviate the difficulties at hospitals stemming from the lack of staff, the government had ordered military doctors to step in. However, the plan did not work well. So what exactly appears to be the problem there?
Well, the health ministry earlier this week started to deploy some 250 military doctors to assist medical facilities that are dealing with shortages in staff on the back of the ongoing medical walkout. On Wednesday, the government deployed 15 of them to assist emergency rooms at 5 hospitals, including 3 doctors each at Ajo University Hospital and Ewha Women's University Mokdong Hospital, 2 at Chungbuk National University Hospital and at Sejong Chungnam National University Hospital, respectively, and 5 at Gangwon National University Hospital. However, hospitals have been complaining that the government's deployment was not much of help. For instance, Ewha Women's University Mokdong Hospital said that following face-to-face talks with the 3 military doctors, they were not appropriate for working in the emergency rooms. The hospital is actually considering to send them back. An official at the health ministry said he understood that there were issues when the 3 military doctors that were assigned to Ewha Hospital arrived regarding which duties they should be responsible for, adding that there seemed to be difficulties in the process of assigning the right roles, or it might just take some time. Now, there was also a similar case at Sejong Chungnam National University Hospital, which said the military doctors were not in the position to immediately treat patients. Now, Sejong City therefore called on the health ministry to create a guideline for the military personnel's tasks. Other hospitals have also made similar remarks and suggestions. So the health ministry, in a briefing on Thursday, vowed to consult with the defense ministry and military doctors to make them really be of help at emergency rooms as fast as possible. The ministry also plans to assign the rest of the 235 military doctors and public physicians at understaffed hospitals across the nation. That, I believe, is going to start on the 9th, which would be Monday. The health ministry, meanwhile, reiterated that so far there is no medical crisis yet.
Again, that's been the big controversy too, because that's not what some people were saying. And I believe the doctors were already warning that despite the military doctors that they're planning to deploy, or the public physicians, that they're probably not going to be capable of running the emergency. It's a different kind of treatment when you're working at the emergency rooms. And so still we have about less than 2 weeks now until the Chuseok holiday begins. And again, the big concerns is that because it's such a long holiday with the weekend starting the Chuseok holidays, that there's going to be major vacuum, not just within the hospitals, but the emergency rooms as well. We'll see what happens. Hopefully, new measures put in place. The presidential office, the government, and the ruling People Power Party had hinted at the possibility of adjusting the planned increase in medical school admissions for 2026, raising hopes for a potential resolution to the ongoing conflict between the medical community and the government. Remember, PPP leader Han Dong-hoon had initially proposed something like this, whereas the top office had kind of rejected his proposal in the initially. But it seems like all the parties are going to get involved to talk about this. Hannah, let's get more.
Yes, that's right. Now, while the 2026 medical school admissions increase had been set at 2,000 students, a more flexible stance from the ruling party and the government, indicating that discussions could be reopened, has opened the door for the possibility of reducing the number, as demanded by some in the medical community and within the ruling party. The People Party leader Han Dong-hoon officially proposed to the opposition party and the medical community with the formation of a ruling opposition medical government consultative body to discuss issues related to medical reforms, including the increase in medical school admissions. Now, the presidential office has reportedly indicated that it is open to adjusting the 2026 admissions increase and is willing to consider forming such a consultative body. Now, this shows a rare alignment between the party and the presidential office on the issue of medical reform and the ongoing conflict with the medical community. Earlier, there were concerns about internal discord within the ruling bloc when the presidential office and government opposed Han's suggestion of postponing the 2026 medical school admissions increase. However, this time it appears that both sides have coordinated in advance and are in agreement. With rising public concerns about medical disruptions ahead of the Chuseok holiday, it seems that the government and ruling party have united in an attempt to address the situation. Now, attention is now focused on whether this will pave the way for resolving the more than 6-month-long conflict between the medical community and the government, and for advancing medical reforms. Now, the first point of interest is whether the opposition party and the medical community will agree to join the proposed consultative body. On Wednesday, Democratic Party floor leader Park Chan-dae suggested forming an emergency consultative body to address the medical vacuum during his speech as the leader of the negotiating group. Now, the ruling party believes that it will be difficult for the opposition to refuse participation given their recent similar proposal. However, the participation of the medical community, which is a key stakeholder, remains uncertain. The medical community has previously taken a firm stance, arguing that even the 2025 admissions increase should be reconsidered in response to Han's suggestion of postponing the 2026 increase. Now, the government and ruling party maintain that the 2025 medical school admissions increase, which is already confirmed as part of the entrance exam guidelines, cannot be adjusted.
So, a couple of things here. First of all, the big question now is with the increase in the medical school admissions for the 2025 academic year, whether or not there was a significant amount of, or they were able to fill in those seats, right, is the big thing, right? Because some people are saying that, well, people might not want to sign up for medical schools given the current situation right now where most of the students are boycotting and classes are not happening. So because things are kind of gray right now, and things are kind of foggy and cloudy with the situation with the medical schools, that people might not actually sign up for medical schools for the 2025 academic year. If they do decide that they're going to adjust the 2026 academic year, how long is the negotiation going to go on for what the figure is going to be? How long are they going to argue about what the actual figure is? And then what happens moving forward then in 2027? Are we going to continue to see the doctors continue to walk out every time they don't want to see 2,000 or 3,000 increase in the medical school admissions quota? It's a tough one right now. And even for the government right now they have to save face, because by saying that they're going to adjust the figures in 2026 academic year, maybe some of the pundits maybe the opposition are going to say, well, you could have done this in the first place and just avoided this whole situation. We went through, 7 months, almost 7 months of this. So things, hopefully, this is a step forward in the right direction, and we'll finally be able to get the medical system normalized once again. Let's move on. Here we talked about kind of a minor reshuffle going on in a ministerial level. President Yoon approving the appointment of a number of ministers on this Friday. I believe they also had their appointment ceremonies as well. So tell us who they are and which positions they're about to fill.
Sure. And let's start with the approval of the appointment of Kim Yong-hyun as new defense minister, who was nominated last month to replace former minister Shin Won-sik. Kim is a retired 3-star army general who served the military for more than 30 years. Under President Yoon Suk-yeol, he was the head of Presidential Security Service for over 2 years. As a close aide to President Yoon, Kim also was part of the Yoon administration's presidential preparatory task force, where he played a big role in relocating the presidential office from Cheongwade to Yongsan. On the same day, President Yoon also presented a certificate of appointment to Shin Won-sik, again, whom I earlier mentioned, who has been serving now as National Security Advisor after his role as defense chief. The appointment of An Chang-ho, a former Constitutional Court judge, has also been approved earlier today. He will now head the National Human Rights Commission of Korea. An is a former public security prosecutor. The National Assembly, meanwhile, did not deliver its report on the confirmation hearing of the appointees, despite President Yoon's request the previous day. Although the law stipulates that minister-level nominees must go through a parliamentary confirmation hearing, in the case the National Assembly fails to adopt hearing reports within the deadline, the president eventually can go ahead and appoint the candidates. And I also want to mention that I think this just came in. The new defense minister, Kim Yong-hyun, that I mentioned, he issued a warning to North Korea today, saying that the regime will face its end if it undertakes provocations. And with that, he vowed to establish an overwhelming defense posture against the threats from the North. And we know that the new defense minister is quite a hardliner when it comes to Pyongyang-related issues.
Yeah, you have to understand that the warning was not, if you attack first, it will be the end of the regime and its leadership. It is, if you conduct some sort of provocation, right? And we've seen, goodness, how many provocations over the past few years now. I mean, that was only a couple of years ago that we saw a record number of ballistic missiles and missiles being fired into the ocean. And so I don't know what that means. If it's just a provocation, and anything could be, even the trash-filled balloons, right? That's considered a provocation too. And so if that is, if that's going to be met with some sort of response from the South Korean military, that's big stuff. And so we'll see. It's going to get quite interesting here on the Korean Peninsula. The U.S. government has introduced a new export controls on cutting-edge technologies critical to national security, such as quantum computing and next-generation semiconductors. And as part of this effort, the U.S. has created a system allowing exports of these technologies to countries with export control regimes equivalent to that of the U.S. without requiring U.S. government approval. However, at least according to some of the experts, South Korea was not immediately included in this list, nor will it have much impact on the South Korean firms. Right. Hannah, let's get more on this.
Sure. Now, that said, the U.S. is reportedly planning to approve export licenses for South Korea upon application, suggesting that the impact on Korean companies will be limited. Now, on Thursday, the U.S. Department of Commerce's Bureau of Industry and Security, also known as BIS, announced an interim final rule Seoul, designating key emerging technologies like quantum computing and advanced semiconductor manufacturing as subjects of export control. Now, this includes quantum computers, related equipment, components, materials, software, and technologies used in the development and maintenance of quantum computers. Now, BIS also restricted the export of tools and machinery essential for the production of advanced semiconductor devices, gate-all-around technology used to develop high-performance computer semiconductors for supercomputers, and 3D printing technologies capable of producing metal parts. Now, this measure targets adversarial nations such as China, Russia, and Iran, which the U.S. has identified as strategic competitors. The U.S. stated that it worked closely with allied countries during the process of implementing these export controls. Now, BIS announced that several countries have already implemented similar export controls for these technologies, and the U.S. has introduced an implementation of export controls exemption, which waives the need for U.S. government approval when exporting controlled items to these countries.
Okay, so since South Korea is not included in the list of the IEC exemption, there has been concerns that Korean companies may be at a disadvantage compared to companies in the IEC exempt countries. Will this cause significant disruptions for Korean businesses?
Well, for now, there are expectations that the impact will be minimal. BIS specified that for exports of the newly controlled items to countries in groups A1, A5, and A6, the presumption of approval principle applies. Now, this means that if an export license is applied for, it is expected to be granted. And South Korea falls into groups A1 and A5. Now, a Washington insider familiar with export controls noted that since the principle is to approve exports to South Korea, there likely won't be any immediate major impact. It is reported that the governments of South Korea and the U.S. have been in close consultation on this issue, but on the other hand, BIS applies the presumption of denial principle to countries in groups D1 and D5, which includes China, meaning that export applications to these countries are unlikely to be approved. Now, to be included in the IEC exemption list, South Korea would need to implement export controls similar to those of the U.S. The Biden administration has been urging allies, including South Korea, to adopt similar export controls aimed at countries like China and Russia to prevent any gaps in enforcement. And the U.S. has especially pressured South Korea to control the export of semiconductor equipment to China especially. Now, while South Korea has been revising its export control system by amending its Foreign Trade Act, the government has yet to make a final decision on whether to join in controlling the export of semiconductor equipment.
Again, for many people, they're saying that this seems like, again, continuous bullying by the United States, right? They've always talked about fair and open trade and fair and open market. However, when you're trying to control which countries can export what to which country, doesn't seem all that fair right now. And there seems to be growing pressure towards the Chinese. And speaking of which, something that we talked about maybe about a month ago, maybe a little bit more, massive tariffs, U.S. tariffs against Chinese-made electric vehicles. Well, the announcement on China tariffs by the U.S. Should be due soon, following a number of delays. It's not just as simple as, yes, we're going to give them 100% tariff, let's do it. Nevertheless, So what's the latest on this?
Well, around a week ago, the U.S. government had delayed its final decision regarding tariff hikes on made-in-China electric vehicles, batteries, semiconductors, and solar cells. And initially, those were to take effect in August. The Biden administration hinted it will make a determination publicly in the coming days. But now it's been already, I think, 6 days, so it should come pretty soon. According to a spokesman for the U.S. Trade Representative's office, the final determination regarding proposed modifications is continuously in development. Those modifications, referring to the tariffs on Chinese goods implemented under the former Trump administration in 2018 and 2019. The recent delay, meanwhile, comes after White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan had met with senior Chinese officials in Beijing, including a meeting with Chinese leader Xi Jinping. The two sides stressed the need to manage U.S.-China ties. What initially was the Biden administration's plan was a 100% tariff on electric vehicles made by China, 50% on semiconductors and solar cells, 25% on lithium-ion batteries, batteries and key materials, steel, aluminum, ship-to-shore cranes, and syringes. And all of that to start on August 1st. Now, probably it's not only the recent talks with China, but also the upcoming elections that need the Democratic Party to balance issues in a well-thought manner. According to an expert cited by the VOA, the Democratic Party for certain does not want to seem soft on China. However, there is lots of pushback from industry and domestic stakeholders who believe new tariffs could be destructive to the U.S. economy. With that, assessing that a delay in action right now seems to be the most attractive option for the government.
Yeah, again, I mean, we talked about how the U.S. will continue to press on China, but they need each other. Like China and U.S., they're in a weird relationship. This is like a toxic relationship, right? And so it seems like they're at war, there's fighting, but still they'll have these high-level exchanges because they know that the U.S. knows that they need the Chinese goods in order to quell the inflation. Goodness, if they stop making all those products that we buy in China, then everything is going to be so expensive, and there goes the inflation, right? And then, of course, being that the United States buys a whole lot of stuff from China and provides labor, that China needs the United States too. So despite all these back and forth, they're still going to have these high-level talks and try to quell things for the time being. But yeah, it does get interesting, especially during election time. Let's move on here. A new hub has been established over in San Jose, California, to support the entry of Korean system semiconductor companies into the U.S. market. Hannah, you have more on this?
That's right. Now, the Ministry of Trade, Industry, and Energy announced on Friday that the Korea-U.S. AI Semiconductor Innovation Center was officially opened on Thursday local time in San Jose. Now, 5 companies have moved into the Innovation Center, and around 20 additional member companies will receive various services offered by the center. This Innovation Center will provide comprehensive support for Korean semiconductor companies entering the U.S. market, including technology development in connection with demand verification and certification, consulting and promotion and networking. Now, the U.S. is a key market, accounting for about 70% of the global system semiconductor market. And for domestic semiconductor companies, such as fabless companies, IP providers, and design houses, to grow into global players, entry into the U.S. market is essential. So in response, the Ministry of Trade, Industry, and Energy established the Innovation Center in San Jose, where global semiconductor companies are concentrated to provide close support. The center will assist in identifying technology development items, providing expert group consulting, offering market and technology trend information, verifying product performance, supporting the creation of demo boards for promotional purposes for client companies, and also offering infrastructure and networking support. Now, at the opening ceremony, participants exchanged opinions on Korea's system semiconductor industry and discussed ways to strengthen semiconductor industry cooperation between the two countries. The ministry will also hold a local meeting with semiconductor companies entering the U.S. market to hear about any challenges they are facing.
Amidst the pension reform plans and policies and reforms that are going to talks and stuff like that, and some people not being too happy with the NPS milestone for South Korea's National Pension Service, opened up an office over in Silicon Valley in San Francisco on Thursday local time. So give us the details of this, and what benefits does this new office actually hold?
Well, Korea's National Pension Service, or NPS in short, just opened its new office in the Bush Podium building in downtown San Francisco. Let me check that building's name again. And this marks the 4th overseas branch. Others are located in New York, London, and Singapore, so really big places. The NPS is the world's 3rd largest pension fund, and this new office is expected to lead to more active participation for diverse investment opportunities, as it's aimed to serve as a hub for alternative investment investments on the U.S. West Coast. And especially the tech sector is being eyed. In fact, the NPS has plans to establish a tech sector team at the San Francisco office. Currently, there are 5 staff at the office, with 5 more expected to be hired. An NPS official prior to the grand opening said that the reason for why San Francisco was chosen as the 4th office abroad is because Silicon Valley has become a, quote, focal point for the most significant and trendy investments of today, including artificial intelligence and biotech. Adding that Silicon Valley is home to numerous international IT and venture capital firms, perfect to interact directly with these new investment sectors and become a member of the elite local investing community. Apart from the NPS, since 2021, other Korean financial institutions that are government affiliated are operating offices in San Francisco, just like the Korea Development Bank and the Korea Investment Corporation. And meanwhile, NPS chairman Kim Tae-hyun was there at the opening ceremony, and in his speech, he made remarks regarding Korea's pension reform that you mentioned, SJ, and it looks like he was asked on site what the most important thing is regarding the pension reform, and he said the priority is that the young people that have to pay for the pension, they should be able to pay for that, he said is the most important thing. So yes, that was the opening of the San Francisco office of the NPS.
Yeah, so, there's ways that they expand the money that we pay, right? Much of it is through stock investment, which didn't do too well, I think, a couple of years ago, and they were impacted by this. But they're also investing in other things, it seems like, and that's a big thing, right? The Silicon Valley is still a big thing. I was looking at the pronunciation.
Yes.
I thought it was going to be like Kobe Bryant, so it's Obi Bush, but it's an Oba, apparently.
Okay,
so you're right
okay.
the first time around.
I was checking here. Thank you for that.
We got about 2 months left until the U.S. presidential elections in November. Early voting, including postal voting, will begin in the United States starting on Friday in North Carolina. Hannah, let's get more on this.
Sure. Now, this U.S. election is shaping up to be a closely contested race, and early voting surged during the 2020 election amid the COVID-19 pandemic. This year, early voting is expected to be a crucial factor in determining the outcome of the election, especially with major events occurring around the time early voting begins, which could directly influence voter sentiment. According to the National Conference of State Legislators, early voting systems are in place for all voters in 47 states, Washington, D.C., Guam, Puerto Rico, and other U.S. territories. Now, early voting can be conducted by mail or in-person voting, and the specific details such as voting and counting schedules or valid voting criteria vary by state. Early voting for this election will begin on Friday in North Carolina, a northern battleground state, and North Carolina plans to send out vote-by-mail ballots to voters who have requested them starting on that day, while Washington State will be the last to begin starting on the 18th of the following month. Pennsylvania, another battleground state, will begin in-person early voting along with postal voting starting on the 16th. In past U.S. elections, early voting accounted for 33% in 2012 and 40% in 2016. However, it surged to 69% in the 2020 presidential election due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Although the early voting rate slightly decreased during the 2022 midterm elections after COVID-19 restrictions were lifted, it remained higher than in previous midterms. Now, this trend suggests that a significant number of voters may once again cast their ballots before Election Day in this presidential race.
Yeah, so if you remember the 2020 presidential elections when the early voting was very, very high, that was the election where Trump, I think, was accusing of voter fraud through early voting, right? So he wasn't a big fan of that stuff, saying, oh, we can't trust the early voting. Who knows what they do with this? They might start messing around with these mail-in ballots, and we could steal, they could steal the Republican votes and stuff. Well, I mean, the consensus is that, that never really happened, right? And I believe there was big pushback towards certain governors to do a recount or make it invalid because there's concerns of voter fraud going on through, the early voting. But it's secure. for the large part. Also, in battleground states that will decide the outcome of the elections, usually places like Ohio's a big one, Wisconsin's a big one. That's the reason why Trump and Harris has been doing all their campaigns in Wisconsin as of late. There's speculation that early voting could play a decisive role, especially with Harris and Trump currently locked in a tight race with the margin of error in these states.
Indeed, that's right. Now, recent polls show that while Vice President Harris has gained momentum, the race in the battleground states remains extremely close. And in this context, the timing of early voting in these states, coinciding with major events, is drawing attention. On the 10th, Harris and Trump will hold their first TV debate in Pennsylvania, which is a key northern battleground state. And additionally, on the 18th, the sentencing for former President Trump's hush money case could have a significant impact on the late-stage dynamics of the election and directly influence early voting sentiment. Now, having been criminally indicted for 4 times, former President Trump has labeled the indictments as political persecution or a witch hunt. He has historically experienced a rallying effect in his support base following each indictment or guilty verdict. Now, this raises questions about whether this trend will continue or if moderate voters will turn away from him. It remains uncertain which candidate will benefit more from early voting in the battleground states and beyond. In the 2020 election, early voting rates among Republican supporters were lower than those of Democrats, partly due to former President Trump's claims of potential fraud in early voting, as SJ mentioned. However, this time Trump is encouraging his supporters to vote early, whether by mail or in person. And additionally, in some states, early votes that arrive after Election Day are still considered valid and counted later, which could once again delay the final outcome of the election if the race remains as tight as current polling suggests.
I don't know if you saw the news recently. Putin came out endorsing Harris and said her infectious laughs makes it look like she's doing well. So basically he was trolling, trolling, and then the White House came out saying, don't be interfering in our elections and stuff like that. It got quite interesting this morning. Anyways, guys, thank you very much for your updates and your news. Have a fantastic weekend, and we'll see you guys again.
Have a great weekend.
You can listen to Korea Now with me, SJ Lee, by downloading the Arirang Radio application or tune in online by visiting www.arirangradio.com. So make sure you tune in Mondays through Fridays, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Korea time.